Welcome to the Circuit of Success Podcast.
The Circuit of Success Podcast.
With your host, Brett
Gilliland. Brett Gilliland, Visionary Wealth Advisory.
The Circuit of Success Podcast. Let's start the show.
Welcome to the Circuit of Success. I'm your host, Brett Gilliland. Today, I've got Joe Davis with me. Joe, how you doing?
I'm well, Brett. How are you?
I am doing great. I forgot to ask you before we start, where are you calling in from? What part of the country are you in today?
I'm down in Miami right now.
I don't even, all I see is a wall and a piece of paper or a picture back there, and it felt like Miami.
World Art Festival there. My daughter ran the half marathon this weekend, so we were down here.
Oh, very cool. That's awesome. Good for her. Well, you are a former managing director at BCG, Boston Consulting Group. You are a speaker. You go to corporations around the country and speak for them, and you also did a TED Talk, which is awesome, and then author of The Generous Leader. So we'll dive into all that stuff. You've got a lot to share, I know, but I always like to start it with a big open question: what has helped make you the man that you are today?
Yeah, that's a big question too, as you know. Well, actually, I thought about it. So I will be tight, but I have 5 points. I think one thing, there are key life events that happened early on in my life that, taught me resilience and something else, which I'll say in a minute. One, my parents divorced when I was 8. That was a big deal. I cried through my wedding vows at age 23, and my mom died at age 30, and there was a lot of emotion wrapped up in there. So, those are sad things maybe, but one first and last, but the resilience was something that came through that. But more importantly for me, I didn't know it then, but I was learning the power of sharing one's humanity and actually showing emotion. It's not the end of the world, because the responses when I shared emotion in those moments were quite strong. Another thing I think was pretty important to me is I had a grandmother who was quite involved, as you might imagine, and she taught me the power of actually having one's back. I mean, she was always there for us. Been in business for 40 years. I had 3 great mentors, one in my high school job and one in my first job at P&G and one at BCG, which I reflect on. They all taught me different things, but they were incredible. And you say, man, today I actually have done a number of 10-day silent meditation retreats.
Wow.
Which you can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine changes a type A go-getter, or at least it teaches the type A go-getter, it's about this moment and, things do change. It's not, the world isn't going to end if it doesn't go perfectly in that moment. And then finally, I'd say I have a spouse of 43 years, and her father has passed away, who really, they just epitomize interest and caring for others. How are others doing? Where are they coming from? Sarah's dad was amazing at that. And I reflect back, actually, I referenced him in the thank you on the beginning of the book, that was also the other thing, just seeing someone care about he was the president of a company, and he knew the name of course, his team, and he knew the name of the people on the plant floor, every one of them.
Awesome.
So there you go. You got 5 things, but I think those all kind of shaped me in different ways.
Absolutely. And 4 kids and 8 grandkids, I see.
8, number 9 on the way, which I don't know if that's quite public yet, but whatever. Your guests aren't going to go find my daughter and say anything.
That's right. Yeah,
and
we'll give it a few weeks anyway. That's great. So talk about your role, obviously at BCG, managing director, served a lot of people. What did you find that some of your biggest learnings throughout your career was, thinking to that man or woman listening to this right now that may need some advice?
Okay, that's interesting. It's 37 years, so I'll keep it tight. I guess different thing. Maybe on the one hand, one thing everybody has to remember is in leadership roles, it is about getting results. The outcomes matter. We know that. But I'm a big believer that especially that it's through the people, your teams, that you're going to get results. And I've kind of learned now, you look at someone that's first management role, managing 3 people, they could do it themselves if they had to. They could work all night and get it done. As you move up, you realize, oh, wow, the only way to get it done is through the people. That's one thing, is really understand you need to leverage your people. The other thing I'd say is pretty interesting or not interesting, but I think back the ability to make a decision with thoughtfulness and not rushed, but a decision to be definitive about it. And then if you're wrong later on, you change your mind. But I see so many leaders who whiffle waffle, get stuck, and everybody loses confidence. And you make a call, and if you're wrong with new data, you change your mind, people respect you. So I think that's actually something I've learned. Then the other thing I did learn, especially during COVID, which everyone should remember, is just the real importance and power of connecting. As a leader, connecting with your people, try to understand where they're coming from, because it ain't where you're coming from, ensuring people connect with one another. I mean, that was very obvious during COVID, but it was also interesting that there were ways to connect, things like the Zoom, which actually, I think people connected more if the organization made an effort,
Right.
connected real more during COVID than when we see each other every day.
Yeah.
So those would be some thoughts, be
Yeah.
decisive in decisions, change your mind if you're wrong, the power of connection, and you can't do it yourself. You got to do it through people.
Well, I think too is that the decision is just trusting your gut, right? I mean, as leaders, you got to trust your gut, trust yourself, and make the decision and live with it and be okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, you collect data, you ask people, questions, you learn, but eventually somebody's got to make the call. I mean, someone asked me when I came head of North America, what's it like? I said, the funniest thing is all the little things roll way up because nobody wants to make a call. Everybody, no one wants to be the bag, whatever it is. I said, the amount of little things I decide on is astounding. So
and by the time they get to your desk, they become bigger deals.
Well, they're bigger, yeah, because nobody else wants to touch them.
Right.
It's like, we have our retreat in June or in May. Really? Well, so-and-so wants it. It's just like silly. Now, of course, there's major decisions too, as far as direction of organization.
So I was looking at your website and it talks about generous listening, and it made me. I talk about this often on the podcast, but you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them proportionately. My 8th grade history teacher, Mr. Harshbarger, used to say that to us. And so when you hear that and you think about your generous listening being kind of one of your, what I would call one of your values, I don't know if that's how you word it or not, but when you hear that 2 ears, 1 mouth, what comes to mind for you?
Well, 2 things. First off, maybe even 80-20 would be better than 66-33 is the first thing I'd say. Your math teacher change the ratio. If they had a way to change the ratio, they might. Well, I'll tell you, the thing that comes to mind to me is nobody knows everything they need to know to make a decision, to decide direction. And so the more you can ask questions and listen to others, and learn what they know that you don't know, the better decision you're going to make together. And that takes, that actually takes humbleness, of course, a little bit of vulnerability to admit you don't know it, but it is so critical. It is so critical. Actually, the other thing you said, but basically come to mind, I always used to, in the consulting business, obviously you need to understand where the client's coming from and what they're really thinking, really, because if you're off base, it's like, oh my God, what am I doing with this consultant around here? And, I always would say to people, engage the skeptics, uncover the no's, don't assume they're just blockers, because most people actually know something and then go figure out how to solve the no's. Because you're going to surprise yourself by thinking, or not surprised, but you're going to get caught out if you just assume those and say, oh, no, this is a bad idea. They're not just trying to cause trouble most of the time, 90% of the time. They know something you're missing.
What did you, when you think about, I think the word focus is such a big word, right? Because we can become very unfocused in today's world with notifications and emails and all this stuff, right? So what did you do to stay locked in at work every day and to deliver and be your best self and to, like what I was talking about, to be focused, laser focused?
Well, actually, probably 2 things, 2 ways to answer that. One, I had my own thing, which for me was exercise, running, which just enabled me to focus during the day. So like physiologically, you do need to have something. So because the minute you start getting too tired, you're not really to focus. The other thing I think, and I didn't say this as a trait of leadership, but something else I learned is the faster you can zero in on what matters, and that takes your gut, as you said, takes listening to others, takes nerve to think, be right, you believe this is what, fast you can zero in what matters and just let everything else go away, or let others deal with it, or let it be noise, the easier it is to focus on what matters. And that was something I learned pretty quickly. It almost became intuitive as to, well, this matters and this doesn't. But I think if you're thinking about where do I need to get to, what's the end goal, whatever that might be, well, if you're looking at the path to get there, it's pretty easy to say, well, this path has nothing to do with where we're trying to go, so cut that one, even if somebody important thinks it's critical.
Yeah. Did you have a process for that? Like what was that like? So if you can kind of go back in your head and think about sitting in your office and you've got these 2 paths, like what was that decision-making process for you?
I guess the thing I'd say is I was trained by one of my mentors. If you want to get here, what are all the paths one can go, and which ones are going to take you off track, and make sure those don't happen, as opposed to, and let the world go down the right path, but get rid of all the paths that are wrong. Which, so when you say identity process, that over time you just start thinking. But of course, you just think, okay, we're going this direction, this direction, this direction. These three do not get there, so we got to do everything to kill them. That was that's one kind of process I did with my own mind. But also, I was quite, just thinking about, here's where we want to be. I mean, it's just a decision tree. Work back. What are the steps to get there? And what really matters? I mean, in my business, what are we selling? We're selling, my old business, we're selling people. We're selling people's insight. We're selling brains. So if we don't have people, we don't have business. Some people, we have to have this and that. No. We have to have people. So if we don't have people, there's no, who's going to do the work? And maybe the machines will change that a little bit in the future, but nonetheless. So it's very easy. Someone say, oh, Joe, but we don't have the best IT system. Okay, you can go work on that. I'm going to make sure we have great people. The hiring is good, and they stay. We retain them.
Walk us through that retreat. So we do this little offsite, 3 or 4 times a year. What was that like for you guys and your leadership team?
When we did offsites, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, you just said walk us through that retreat. Did I mention the retreat?
You said like the retreat was in May or June or something. So just made me think about the retreat.
Those were, well, two types of things. One, those were as simple as, to my point on the people. I mean, we had offices that had family weekends. That literally you brought all the kids and everybody for 3 days to somewhere nice. To be honest, it was nice. It was morale building. It also, after a while, the children would say, Dad, you can't quit, or Mom, you can't quit, because I want to go back to that retreat next year. So it was an unintentional retention tool. That's what I mentioned. That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking.
But to go deeper on that, I mean, that matters, right? We just did one with about 12 of us. We have our financial advisors. We went out, to the guys' club and just had a blast, right? And even if it's only 24 hours, but I think those things are critically important to the culture. So again, that advice to the business leader listening right now that maybe not do that stuff, to your point, it's retention, but also culture building, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, yeah, the two are one and the same, the culture building. Yeah. But absolutely, it's funny because you hear people say, we can't afford it. That's not worth the money, blah, blah, blah. Well, you don't have to go to the fanciest place in the world, but no, I think whatever the drive time or the airplane time and the few hotel rooms, you cannot outweigh it. The value of that when you're engaging with your people. I think the other thing is, you also want to make sure you do use those things in a way that enables people to connect. I actually was reading a study that Adam Grant and somebody else did, doesn't matter, but I think it was for Swiss Re or some company. And they took the executives at some retreat and said, okay, each executive sit together, maybe 20 minutes, and tell that person, like I would tell you something about me, very personal, you've never heard before. And these people had never done that. They'd never shared themselves. And it was like, holy moly, I didn't realize Brent was going through this, or I didn't realize Joe was going through that or went through that. And it built a connection and a culture. It was really interesting. These were all pretty, traditional, I don't know if they're white male, but traditional white male kind of guys that didn't share. And it was really powerful. So I actually think in those retreats, I'm sure you did some version, whether you're just hanging out at night, and if you're just drinking heavily and partying, that's one thing. But if you're, having a glass of wine and telling stories, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, absolutely it is. What when you think about that, being transparent, being vulnerable, it's not normal, right? We don't like to do it. I've gotten really good at it over the years, I think. But even as leaders, right, we don't want to come across as weak. So how did you do that? How did you open up to people and share? Is it just doing it and then it just becomes easier?
I think as I mentioned very briefly at the beginning, I mean, I cried through my wedding vows, 23 years old. My wife was strong and clear as a bell. But afterwards, all these people came up to me, said, oh, wow, the emotion in the church. It was so wonderful to see the love. Now, I was 23. I didn't compute what was going on then. Yeah. And then when I was 30, my mom died. I just sobbed through my 3 boys up there, sons giving a talk. I couldn't get through. The priest at the time said, well, Joe, don't worry, for tears are the fountains of love. And the same feedback from all the people in the church. Now then I maybe started to think, oh wait, if you actually show a little emotion here, you're motivating, inspiring, and moving people. It's not that you're a loser and everyone's.
Right.
So I think, it's interesting because those, and then over time, I was willing to. I mean, in the in the book, I have a chapter about vulnerability, and my dad was gay, and it took me a long time to get it, and then understand it, and then acknowledge it. It was just an interesting thing. But eventually that was something I could acknowledge. But I'm sure all those steps along the way were what helped for me. Just on how people do that or could do it. I mean, I asked some people when I was doing that chapter. Someone said to me, "Well, Joe, think back to a time where you exposed yourself, like maybe me crying, and what happened? You're still here. Didn't the world didn't end? That so much, and maybe actually people appreciated the humanity a little bit, and grab onto those moments, and then take a little step across whatever line you have." Can I tell you one story on this?
Absolutely.
I had a colleague who I asked him, when have you stepped across your line on vulnerability? He said, "Well, Joe, I don't like to share any vulnerability." He gave an example. He said, he was a partner at BCG. If I'm working with a team and I can tell they're getting stuck and they might ask me what to do and I don't have an answer, I will leave the room before I have to say, "I don't know," to his, team of 3 or 4 people. Well, yeah, I know, like, okay, well, let's waste time. And he said, one time, okay, this is really ridiculous. So he said, I stayed in there. I said, "I don't know." And he was stunned because the burst of energy in the room. Oh, if he doesn't know and we don't know, oh, it's okay not to know. Oh, let's all work on it together. The creative juices started flying.
Yeah.
The boss shared vulnerability and uncertainty. They could move past their own fear of it. It was and it's only, "I don't know." That's not very hard. Sorry, I'm kind of lecturing there.
No, you're spot on. It's funny. I just gave a talk recently at a school, and I shared that story, and I think I even shared it on a podcast recently. But when I was probably 23 years old, a client asked me a question, right? Trying to do wealth management, and I said, "I don't know, but I will find out and let you know by 2:00." And I didn't think about it in the moment as much, but when I then let that guy know the answer before 2:00, he's like, "I'm going to become a client. You did exactly what you said you're going to do, and you did it before you said you were going to do it," right? So I think it's good for me to look back on my career and think of the things. It's okay to not know an answer, right? To your point as a leader.
Well, also, I think even more powerful than that is can we swear? You didn't bullshit me in the morning,
Right.
which
Yeah.
doesn't win any friends. That's going to lose more than. I mean, Scott Kirby, CEO of United, I was talking to him, and he said during COVID, he went out to the staff and said, "I don't know when we're going to fly again." Because who knew? And all his team, you can't show that uncertainty. You can't show. He said, "Guys, what do you want me to lie?" I mean, if there's ever a time where one can admit they don't know where the world's going, that was it. But his team was really nervous that you have to be in control, boss. You need to be the guy. And he said, "No, we're going to say we don't know where this is going. We'll stick together. We'll do our best. We'll make decisions." But it's just. And I don't know, a version of "I don't know" is okay. Now you can't be lost and never know. We did say, we started with the ability to make decisions. If you're wrong, change them. That's okay.
Yeah. Trust yourself, though. Again, it goes back to that trusting yourself.
Yeah.
Talk about that 10-day silent retreat. I've got a buddy that's done a couple of these, man, and that just sounds almost impossible to me. But let's talk about it.
Well, yeah, it was incredible. Let me say that. So I didn't know what I was walking into when I went. I actually had a coach when I was running the Washington office. And it's funny. He had said to me, "Joe, you got to slow down." That was like in February. Then in March, maybe let's just relax. Well, Joe, in April, so maybe just take a seat on the ground and just relax for a minute. He had been to these things and he was warming me up to the idea.
Mm-hmm.
I went. It was literally 4:30 a.m. to 9 o'clock. 4:30 lights on. You meditate. 4:30, 6:30 breakfast, etc. No engagement with anybody. You actually didn't even look at each other. You weren't supposed to. Silent the whole time. No pens, no paper, no books. It was fascinating because there was like at the beginning maybe 30 or 40 women and 30 or 40 men where I did it. By the end there was maybe 10 men. But a lot of the men were young kids, 23, 24, who couldn't deal. They were taking notes at night. They just couldn't deal with it. Not a single woman quit. So you tell me, what about you?
Wow.
We can talk about that. Or if they did, I didn't. I mean, you didn't see each other.
Yeah.
But I tell you, it was very powerful for me. at the beginning, it just helps you realize that, hey, your stresses, your anxieties, they're mostly self-induced. And we have dogs, and I don't like when the dogs bark, and I never liked it when the dog just drove me nuts. And I realized, I've realized through all this, that dog barks. The sound is over for the dog. It goes through the air. It goes fast, goes into my eardrum process, goes to my brain, and then it goes to the anger neuron. The thing was over well before my time. And now it was fast, but like the dog moved on. He didn't care. It's all me that cared. I was also sitting next to a guy at the beginning who turns out had a cold. He had a beard. He was coughing, sneezing, scratching. It was just yucky. And you get to ask questions about technique at noon for 5 minutes kind of thing. So I said, this guy's driving me nuts, and I'm just not. I said something terrible. I said, I'm not used to being around people like this. I mean, it was really terrible to say that. And the guy said, oh, Joe, this is like on day 2. Just be calm and tell me what you think on day 10. On day 10, I realized it was my problem, not his problem. I was the one that was upset with him scratching me. Now, they also pointed out to me he had a bad cold, and they did give him something in the middle because, but it was all, it was me reacting to the moment, not him.
Yeah.
And when I got home with kind of 2 things, my wife said, well, if this is what you're going to be like, you can go every year. Although then I said, maybe I'll go to India for 30 days. She goes, no, you may not come home. You can't do that one. Also, I had a 13-year-old daughter at the time who, I have 4 kids. She was the one that always would fight with you. And I didn't fight. Oh, and it made her so mad. I said, it's okay. I don't care. Oh, she just she wanted to fight.
Make her more mad.
It did, made her more mad. Whatever the content. Well, we won't get into teenagers, but sorry, I'm going to turn that off.
Yeah, I got 4 as well. I got 4 boys. I've got 19 down to 10, and so it keeps you busy. 19 to 10. So 19, 17, 14, and 10. Keeps me busy. So talking about that, talk to us. A lot of parents listen to this, right? That are, again, maybe they're teachers, maybe they're business owners, whatever they are. How did you continue to build your career, but also stay in the moment and be a good dad and have a relationship with them now as they're not teenagers anymore, right? How did that happen, and what advice would you give to us?
Yeah, I'll tell you that one. I've been asked that many times over the years, and I didn't have FaceTime where you could call them and look at them, So I think number one thing I will say, well, several things. Number one for me, because I was on the road 4 days a week, is I didn't miss things that mattered. My parents were divorced. My mom missed everything. She was a school teacher. I was mad then. I realize now she was teaching. But, like when they're 7 years old and they have that little skit at 5 in the evening, the little show. If I was in Toronto, I'd get on a plane at 3, be there by 5, get on a plane first, 4 in the morning, or get up and be back at work. People say, where are you going? I said, I can't miss this show because my kid will remember. You can miss something. My wife wishes maybe I help more on the daily homework. You can miss the daily homework. If you don't remember it, you don't miss these things. All damn weekend, it was soccer game after soccer game. That was number one. Be there when they're going to remember it. That sounds a little Machiavellian, but number 2, we built a lot of traditions in our family. I mean, we first off had no TV, which was nice. Friday and Saturday dinner, there was no going out. We all ate dinner as a family. Sunday, we actually ate in the dining room. Kind of got dressed up. I mean, I didn't make my kids wear ties, but we got dressed up. That one didn't last forever, but it lasted for a while. So traditions. And then the last and most important thing, and I learned this from my wife, is just talk to them. I mean, she was, so you know how it is because your boys, they all just grunt. But, how was your day? Asking the 10-year-old.
Good.
Yeah, good. What was good? Nothing. Well, nothing was good. And she would just go until eventually something happened during the day they talk about. And that's probably the most important thing, is the talking. Yeah. Those were my tricks. Never miss what matters, build some traditions and keep them, and then talk to them.
Yeah, that's great. What,
go ahead.
When you look back again at your career, what is there one risk that you took that was really scary, but it was a kind of defining moment for you?
Really scary.
Or just maybe not even scary, but just, it was a big deal, right? You look back and like, thank God I did that.
I mean, it's interesting. Probably 2 things. I mean, taking a chance to trying something new within now it was in the context of BCG, so it wasn't like I quit, but I was a consumer and retail person, done that for probably 15 or 20 years at the time. We wanted to start public sector practice. I was the head of Washington at the time. I said I'd start it. I gave up every client I had. And that, this is a client service business.
Yeah.
So a lot of people thought I was crazy. Now, if it didn't work, I would go back, I guess. So I didn't get that, but it was a big risk by many measures, but it was exciting. It was fun. Startup world inside of a company is pretty cool. I actually got to be not on the road so much, but that was, I just forced myself to learn something really new. The other thing, I didn't make the head of North America the first time I wanted to have it. And then it's been BCG 20 years. I thought, well, what do I do now? I could quit, keep doing what I was doing, maybe try something different. And the guy that got the role and I were talking, he said, why don't you go see if you can, quote unquote, fix the West Coast? The West Coast for us had been, consulting firms do fine, but it was underperforming relative to what BCG was used to. And so I went out there, and I've been doing underperforming for 50 years. Everyone said, Joe, you're crazy. And he can't make a difference. I guess I'll say the numbers, but I got there. The revenue had been 100 million for 3 years. I left 3 years later at 250. So
Nice.
there's a risk in that. Well, I took a pay cut. If it failed, I just what the hell happened? I would never get now it worked, and I got the head of America job partly because of that. So.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think made you do that?
Made me do it?
Yeah.
I think I just get motivated, inspired when I'm putting myself into new, uncomfortable situations. I think it's one reason I went to consulting. I worked the first 6 years at P&G. It's kind of like the same old. After about a few years, wait a minute. Last year we sold Head and Shoulders. This month, now we're selling it again. And so the beauty of that role is different opportunities. And I think I thrived on different and new opportunities. See if I could actually make a difference. I love people, so how can I motivate, inspire a different group of people? And like any one of us, if you're doing those kind of things, you like a challenge. The same old job gets pretty old after a while. Now, a lot of people can't make changes, so I got to be careful. But I think it was really the challenge of just stretching myself was quite motivating to me.
Yeah, that's great. What
I was going to say, every executive I had talked to for the book, they all said there were the career went that way when they expected to go that way. They all had, lateral moves that they didn't like, but that all made a difference to where they needed to get to. So I think, you think about that in your job. If some interesting, maybe not exactly straight up thing comes along, but it's going to broaden who you are in the organization or in life, go for it. Now, I don't know the details to say that, but go for it. Think hard about going for it. I'll say that.
Yeah. The when you think about the next phase of business life, and obviously you just stopped working at BCG last month, but where do you see AI going in the business world? Do you guys talk much about that, or have you?
Well, yeah, of course, BCG does, because we also it's a beautiful thing. Anytime there's change, it's a nice thing for a consulting firm. So I think a couple of things, and I don't know if I'll just say things that a lot of people realize. Of course, it'll replace some roles. It will not. It's a funny thing, because I think when it started, a lot of people thought it'd replace the bottom roles, but it's not going to replace the waiter. You still need someone to serve your food. It's not going to replace the doorman downstairs. There's a lot of jobs that ain't going anywhere. It's not going to completely replace, the field workers. I do think, and of course, obviously, it's obvious all the the programming and that kind of stuff will be replaced. It already is. I think that a very critical thing I will say is I don't know if you know this name, Ian Bremmer, who has the Eurasia Group, is a thoughtful guy, and then Larry Summers. He was just citing him, but Summers said that it's sure IQ is going to matter in business. It always matters to a degree, but the machines can bring a lot of IQ. The thing that people are going to have to, the new leaders and businessmen, those that can make a difference in EQ, are going to be those who can manage an organization. And I've got a colleague of mine who's talking to me about, how he sees it. He sees it where there's, and I think Altman and these guys talked about it. There's a set of humans and a set of machines. Maybe it's a team of 8, and it's two two little machines and 46 people, and they're interchanging. But someone's got to inspire and motivate those people who are now working with something that's not the same as what they did work. And I actually deeply believe that. I asked BCG at the beginning of all this, I said, because as I was writing my book, I said, what about the human side of all this? They said, oh, wow, we hadn't thought about that yet. But, now people are thinking about it and seeing it. And I think that's going to be a change at a macro level, which is those who bring in, leading with humanity, EQ, leading with the heart, whatever word servant leadership, you pick the word.
Yeah.
They're going to stand up, stand out amongst the others, because just the sheer brain power, the machine will bring it. You got to have it. I'm not saying, Elon Musk is a genius. He might be, interesting character, but there's a value to genius. Right. I'm not saying that's, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but, the EQ is going to be a thing that I think is more valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the human with the high EQ that understands the IQ, right? That understands it and knows the AI, right? That can then put that out in the real world.
Yeah, and or the people that have to work with the AI, how do I inspire and motivate them? How whatever it is. And if people are losing jobs around you, how do you keep those that you need and keep them motivated? I mean, there's, the basics of inspiring and motivating your team ain't going away, and they're probably just going to grow, because you're not going to only manage what depends on what you're doing if you're just managing programmers. But even then, someone's got to check ultimately what came out of the machine. Is it good enough? I mean, we do that now. We're going to do it when people program. And I hope we continue to.
What? Yeah, I agree. I think the AI thing too is like, I also think about it from a kid's standpoint. To your point, the IQ and EQ, but as one, they're going to know how to use it, right? But number two, I hope that it doesn't get in the way of deep critical thinking.
Well, now you got to a whole new area, which is very interesting. No. I think you asked earlier about being a parent. I think the onus is going to be, I mean, the schools will do the best they can do, but it's going to be on the parents to ensure your child uses the tools, because you block them from using it. That's naive. I mean, they're going, but also puts the tools together. Okay, kid, think about the story you want to write. Okay, go ahead and put it in the machine. Okay, now, did it write what you wanted? Change it to be what you're really. I mean, that's not the end of the world, And oh no, and that's because that's going to happen. So why not make them think about what they're doing with it, what comes out, and whether it's really them? I mean, there's ways to still teach your child, even though there are going to be a lot of shortcuts. You and I didn't have, and we can't block them. I don't believe.
What is crazy though, what it already can do. Like, I've got a buddy that I don't even know which one he uses, but he takes a picture of his fridge and says, based on what you see, make me a meal plan. And it's like, holy smokes. And it just creates the recipe, and there he goes. And
well, it's funny. My son, he has his own business, and I don't know, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago, we were talking about this. And he said, what's this AI stuff by? I said, well, like, create your marketing plans and write the. He said, oh yeah, I already use this tool, whatever name it was, Jethro or something. It does all my marketing stuff. Yeah, I don't hire anybody anymore. So he was using it and didn't know it was AI. He said, oh, it's really great, man. I just have to edit a little bit. It saves me. Otherwise, I was hiring this guy in Colorado. No, I don't call him anymore. It was really interesting. Yeah. Well, I had a friend also, your point on the refrigerator, that's so funny. He put all his credit card bills, I guess PDF, put them in. They said, because he felt like he was spending too much money. He said, tell me where I'm spending all my money. And this thing went through and analyzed, you're traveling a lot more. I mean, it was pretty interesting. And just from PDFs, that's pretty interesting.
It's insane. It's insane. The robots scare me. If we're going to get robots one day, I'm afraid if we can hack into a computer, you can hack into a robot, I'm sure. And those are the worrisome stuff.
Well, you're old enough to remember 2001: A Space Odyssey and HAL. And we're on the way to HAL. I mean, how many of those sci-fi shows and movies that you and I watched, I'm a little older than you, but a lot of them are coming around to be true. Maybe not Star Trek. I'm not sure we can ever teleport. That might be a little bit difficult. But, the Jetsons cars, they're being tested right now to fly. Fly. Yeah. I just think about what would be the red lights in the lanes in the sky? How does that going to work?
It's going to be crazy. It's going to be crazy. Talk to us about your book, The Generous Leader.
Yeah. So, I think we've hit a lot of these themes. I'm just a huge believer. And if you're, as I said to start, you've got to drive results. But if you're really going to drive those results, people are going to look to leaders to bring their human self and to recognize the humanity in them. And that's what it's going to take to motivate and inspire people. And actually, I think essentially someone once said to me, well, it's just the young kids and they'll grow up and, have a mortgage and be just like you and me. But I think it's actually all of us. I think technology, pretty sure technology, just changed. Remember the BlackBerry, all of a sudden you're on 24/7. Now the phone you're always on.
Yeah.
Then COVID put it to bed. So our work life has blurred. You cannot leave your human side at home and some other thing comes to work because it's just it's all intermingled. And as we just talked about AI, I think AI is only going to drive that further. So I'm a big believer that a generous leader is one who really spends the time to think about, giving to others to enable, without expectation of direct personal benefit, to enable others to grow and thrive at their full potential. And that's how they'll get the best results. And, what we talked about, through traits such as vulnerability, which we talked about, and authenticity, which is essential, traits like being an exceptionally good listener, etc. There's a handful of them. But I think the days, no offense, but the days of Jack Welch, Neutron Jack fired, it's just, or IBM, white shirt, blue suit, everybody was the same and they're a cog in the wheel. I don't think that's going to fly. The best people, if they're just a cog in the wheel and they don't feel like their leader has values or is human or is growing and developing them, they're changing jobs. The best can change jobs. So this is just, and it's kind of it's not a theoretical book. It's a lot of stories from me and leaders I talk to, and actually some how-to and actions you can take. My daughter said, "Oh, Dad, this is unusual. I can actually do something with it." I said, "Well, I'm kind of an action-oriented guy versus a dreamer." So I said, "Well, what did you expect from me?"
It's like, let's take action. Let's get it done. Student of the game. How did you stay a student of the game to make sure you're always at the top?
I guess I think number one is I always put myself in I always look for new and challenging and unusual situations to put myself in, because you constantly had to then up your game. I think of it's all BCG, but it's different things, different types of practices, different types of clients, and then obviously different roles. So I think the number one thing is forcing yourself into new situations that are uncomfortable, because you got to learn. And it could even be small things. It doesn't have to be major role changes, but take on a new project at work. Be the guy that'll organize those retreats for incredible cultural success. And then I was a big believer in, and I actually heard you say this, I think on one of your podcasts, on really when you get in a new role, maybe somebody said, when you get in a new role, learn everything you can from everybody else who's been there before, the people working there now. I mean, this is where the humbleness thing, you don't know shit. Sorry, you don't know anything. Learn from all of them.
You're right.
Those kind of things keep you at the top of your game. And then finally, understand that everybody else knows more than you do. And the more you can ask questions and learn what they know, you're at the top of your game.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're arrogant enough to think that you do know everything and that you're at the top of the game, that's when it's going to go south pretty quickly.
It won't last. No, I had one.
I want to be the dumbest guy in the room.
Alex Zorkorsky, this ex-CEO of J&J, I was listening to him talk once. He said, "Hey, the role of the leader is not to have the best idea; is to have the best idea come out of the room." And that's, of course. Now, we don't all think that as leaders.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, where do our listeners find more of you, and where do they get the book?
Well, you can get the book all the usual places, Amazon, etc. Yeah. Some bookstores, but Amazon or any of those online bookstores have it. You can order it on my website, joedavis.com. You can go to my website. There's a lot about me. And then I'm a pretty big user of LinkedIn. If someone wants to actually connect, I didn't used to pay attention to LinkedIn messages, but now I do, and I will respond, one way or the other. I'm pretty good about that. So you can find me, through LinkedIn. You can find me directly, and you can. Otherwise, my website, very easy, joedavis.com or LinkedIn. And the book, I don't have if you want.
Well, hang with me here, but thanks so much for being on the Circuit of Success. Really appreciate you sharing your story and your message.
Thank you, Brett. This is great.